Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And as you know, last episode I got a podcast divorce from Josh. But I have an offer for you, Josh. If you can keep a job for 6 months and not make me watch a bad movie for 6 months, I will podcast marry you again.
Well, that is sweet, but I think you're going to be standing alone on the Empire State Building with your microphone because I don't know that I can guarantee that I can accomplish that.
Will you be getting into a tragic auto accident?
No, I don't need to. I don't need the auto accident. I'm just going to fail on the basic requirements there, I think.
Yeah, I think you not recommending a bad movie is a more sure shot than you holding a job for 6 months.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you qualify what holding a job means and whether it's a bad movie by your standards or whose standards exactly. But we'll see how that all goes. Tune in 6 months to find out.
None of us have normal jobs. So.
That is true. We're all here podcasting. What is happening? We are talking about the films of 1939 in this season. And today, I believe, as this is being released, it is Valentine's Day. And Jason, you love doing holiday-themed episodes. And so for this season, we thought we would talk about one of the most famous romantic movies of all time in honor of Valentine's Day, and that is Leo McCarey's Love Affair. And I don't think we've done a Valentine's Day episode before, actually.
No, Josh, as you know, we're cold-hearted sons of bastards, and we normally look away from love. But this year, we're opening ourselves up to new experiences.
We are, yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like we've discussed it, again, because you're always trying to, see if we can talk about some holiday-themed things, but it's never quite worked out. So thank goodness we could.
Yeah. I keep pushing for that Secretary's Day movie,
yeah.
But...
well, when we get to whatever year Secretary opened, we'll have to make that happen.
Maybe we could show that at a screening with a group of secretaries and get various opinions on if they've ever been in experiences like that.
Yeah, well, the relationship in this film is a bit more conventional than in Secretary.
Look at that guy, Dave. That's a professional transition right there.
Doing my best to stay on topic here.
Give him a chocolate.
When we talk about Love Affair. Directed by Leo McCarey and co-written as well by Leo McCarey, who was even at this time a major director in Hollywood. This was a story idea that he initiated originally, although it went through numerous different iterations before it ended up in its final form with Charles Boyer and Irene Dunne as a couple who meet on an ocean liner, both engaged to other people, fall in love, and agree that if they can successfully extricate themselves from their other relationships and maintain successful independence, I guess, get jobs, have financial stability, they will meet 6 months later at the top of the Empire State Building to reunite. But things don't go exactly as planned for them when they try to do that.
Yeah. I always think of the bit in Hot Tub Time Machine where Clark Gregg is talking to that woman and he's like, "Hey, can I have your number?" And she's like, "No," but and he's like, "Well, how can I see you again?" And she goes, "Find me." And he's like, "That just sounds exhausting."
Yeah. Well, this is pre-internet here. I guess so is Hot Tub Time Machine, at least in the time that they travel back to. But it was less easy to just find someone back in this day, although they still do, right? Eventually, I mean, spoiler, I guess, but Charles Boyer just looks her up in the phone book at the end of the movie.
I mean, maybe it was easier to find someone because, everyone was out and about socializing.
I suppose, and everyone was listed in the phone book. There was just one place to look for people's names. But it's sort of, it's more romantic that they make this kind of plan and that they're going to have this reunion or anticipate having this reunion that, of course, doesn't quite happen. But that's how you did it in 1939, I guess, when you wanted to consummate your love affair.
Check out those gams.
Yeah. So this movie was a hit. It grossed $1.8 million on its budget of $860,000. And it was nominated for 6 Oscars, although it did not win any of them, but it was nominated for Best Picture. Irene Dunne was nominated for Best Actress. Maria Ouspenskaya, who plays the grandmother of Charles Boyer's character, was nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
And she's lovely.
She is lovely. She's such a nice grandmother, so friendly, so sweet. It was nominated for Best Original Story, which, as we talked about, I think in an episode or two ago, was a separate category from screenplay. And Best Art Direction and Best Original Song for the kind of cloying song that they sing with the little orphan children.
Oh, it's not Wishing?
Yeah, isn't that what it's called? Wishing? Isn't that yeah.
Which became a big hit after this.
I mean, she sings it, but then they, in the nightclub, right? But then they also sing it. No, she sings a different song in the nightclub. The Wishing is the
I think
song.
She sings Wishing in the nightclub, dude.
Does she? I thought she sang something else in the nightclub.
Hold on, let me sing it for you, and maybe that'll jog your memory.
Please.
That's all I
Yeah, no, that wasn't even... I feel like there's two songs in this film, one of which is the song that she sings in the nightclub, and one of which is Wishing that they sing with the little orphan kids.
All right, whatever, Josh. Back to Leo McCarey. He does have 3 Oscars, 2 for Best Director, The Awful Truth and Going My Way, 1 for Best Writing for Going My Way, and he also has 5 other nominations.
Yeah, he was, again, at this, Going My Way is later, but The Awful Truth was before this, and he certainly was a major player in Hollywood as reflected in all these, in the critical response as well. Critics were definitely positive about this film. Frank S. Nugent in the New York Times said,
The Nuge!
The Nuge, yes. No relation to Cat Scratch Fever for this Nuge.
Yeah, we're not going to wango tango with Frank S.
Definitely not. Frank Nugent said, Leo McCarey, who directs so well it is almost antisocial of him not to direct more often, has created another extraordinarily fine film in Love Affair. Like other McCarey pictures, this one has the surface appearance of a comedy and the inner strength and poignance of a hauntingly sorrowful romance. As co-author, director, and producer, he must be credited primarily for the film's success, but almost as large a measure of acknowledgement belongs to Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer for the facility with which they have matched the changes of their script, playing it lightly now, soberly next, but always credibly, always in character, always with a superb utilization of the material at hand.
Yeah, so I have a lot of things to discuss just off of that right there, Josh. So first of all, McCarey is like this towering, legendary figure, but I don't think, we talk about him in the same breath as like Kukar or, some of the other directors of that time, Victor Fleming. It was kind of a discovery for me, just learning about him. And, I watched Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers movie, which I think I've seen before that he also directed. And it was just like, he's kind of like lost to history, but he's a real major figure here.
Yeah, I feel like some of his movies are still pretty well known and well regarded. I mean, this one, and as we'll maybe talk more about later, the remake that he himself directed, An Affair to Remember, I think people still watch these films and remember them. Of course, the Marx Brothers, and Duck Soup is one of the most famous Marx Brothers films. I feel like The Awful Truth is usually mentioned among great screwball comedies, and Going My Way and Bells of St. Mary's, which are Bing Crosby films. But they're maybe more known for those things. Oh, it's a screwball comedy, it's a Bing Crosby film, it's a Marx Brothers film, rather than it's a Leo McCarey film. And he's not, like you said, as known as a major figure on his own these days.
Yeah, but it's strange because Nugent kind of, like all these quotes I found from everyone who's worked with him, just basically kind of reinforces that quote, of that this guy is just a master and he can't make a bad movie. So I got a few of those. Charles Boyer said, any picture that Leo McCarey directs is its own guarantee. He can't make a bad picture. And there's a lot of kind of quotes like that just from everyone who's talking about this guy. It seems like Clark Wales, who is a kind of film reviewer / historian, recommending a Leo McCarey production is something like recommending $1 million or Beauty or A Long and Happy Life. any of these things is a very fine thing to have. And the only trouble is that there are not enough of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly every review that I found, even though Charles Boyer and Irene Dunne were certainly like well-known stars at the time, it wasn't like some of the things we've talked about this season, like with John Wayne or Jimmy Stewart, where we know how famous they are now, but they weren't necessarily then. Like these were major stars, and yet Leo McCarey like overshadows them as this presence in Hollywood. And I think at the time he was well known among film fans and film reviewers, and also like that Boyer quote sort of represents that within Hollywood he was this very beloved, respected figure.
Right. It's, it's amazing that he was such a towering figure, and we don't kind of think of him in the same breath as Ford or, Fleming anymore.
Right. No, that's true. So Variety, in their unbylined review, said, Leo McCarey's initial production for RKO as a producer-director offers an entirely new approach to what has become accepted picture technique. Basically, it's the regulation formula of boy meets girl. First half is best described as romantic comedy, while second portion switches to drama with comedy. McCarey attacks his subject with slow and deliberate tempo, allowing main story theme to progress in a straight line, while adding many sidelight incidents of drama and comedy along the way. If audiences accept the leisurely tempo maintained throughout, picture has chance for some holdovers in the keys.
Yeah, so that is interesting that they blew the opportunity to go with it's like Boyer meets girl.
Oh,
but
yeah. They do often love their puns there, and also no definite articles for whatever reason.
Well, on your grammar podcast, you could bring that one.
Yeah, well, it's their style. That's the way that it is.
So I did feel the same way. Tonally, it's like it shifts tones, and sometimes it's like, this is great. This is exactly what I want. And then other times I was like, I'm not sure. Why is this like this right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like all these reviews, the ones I'm quoting and other ones that I saw, express this sort of like amazement that McCarey could mix comedy with drama. Like it'd never been done before. And I feel like even though maybe sometimes when we look back at older movies or older time periods, they really are things that hadn't been done before that we take for granted now. But I've seen lots of movies from the 1930s, and the mix of comedy and drama was very common. So it seemed a little overblown to me that people were amazed. I mean, it is tough to balance those tones often, and a lot of movies don't get it right. But I feel like this movie, the tones, it was very smooth. It was never like over the top, wacky, crazy comedy like The Awful Truth or something, or the Marx Brothers, like things that McCarey has done before. And the drama was never like overwrought melodrama either. It all felt this kind of like gentle, sweet tone throughout to me.
I think that's fair. I was waiting for it. Like it took a minute for it to ramp up for me. The first 20 minutes, I was like, why? What is happening? Why am I going to care? And then once we get to Grandma, that sequence was like where I didn't think it was going to mean much, like turned the whole movie around for me.
Right. So you didn't find the early sort of like bantery courtship between them amusing?
It was okay, but maybe it's just that we've, and obviously, like you said, this is 39, but I've seen it in so many other movies done in ways that maybe I liked a little more. And I was also a little unclear on Boyer's character because, he's marrying this heiress and he's on this like, elegant ship for this Atlantic crossing. So I assumed that he had money on his own. So when we got to the part where it was like, if I keep a job for 6 months, I'll prove to you I'm good enough for you. I was like, wait a second, does he need a job? So that was a little unclear.
I think he's kind of a gigolo a bit. I mean, I think he has money because
he's a playboy.
Yeah, because he keeps dating rich women, and he's about to marry this heiress, as you said, who's presumably paid for his ocean voyage to come meet her to marry her. So that was kind of the impression that I got.
I think you're right. I just wasn't all clear on that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, we have the movie opens with those like radio reports, like he's a major, society figure or whatever, that they're reporting about his various relationships. So I think that's meant to kind of give you an idea of who he is, but it is a little jarring to just drop you into that.
Right. I kind of like those newsreel reports.
Yeah, we need to bring back the days when some random dude's engagement being broken off is the top story on the front page of the newspaper, right?
You don't think that'll happen if Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift break up?
I mean, it'll be big news, but would it be like the top story on the front page of the New York Times? I don't think so.
Seeing as to where the Times has gone in the last few years, I wouldn't be surprised.
I doubt that. But it probably wasn't really at this in 1939 either. I mean, it's for the dramatic purposes in the movie. I just thought that was kind of amusing.
What in the whiz bang?
Right. So finally, Box Office Digest, also unbylined, their review said, Leo McCarey has delivered to RKO a great big bundle of money-making entertainment. And to the industry, he has delivered one more argument in proof of the fact that the producer-director combination is the thing that makes pictures. For the public, we should have started this review with raves about Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer. They have never done more delightful work. And to say that they step along in stride, step for step, is a tribute to either one in red-hot competition. We could also mention that the screenplay is an exceptionally intelligent effort. It must be unfortunately recorded that there is a letdown in interest for a half-reel when boy and girl are separated. But McCarey's skill in handling individual scenes with the old Roach technique carries through this tough spot and on to a grand climax. And the old...
What is the old... Yeah, I was going to ask you.
That's referring to, Roach is capitalized. It's referring to Hal Roach, who was a producer of comedy like two-reelers and stuff in the silent era, I believe. Might have also produced like those Marx Brothers movies and stuff.
Two-handers?
No, two-reelers, short films.
Okay. Man, Josh is deep cutting me today, Dave.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
Mm-hmm.
In Tom Flannery's book, 1939, The Year in Movies, he wrote, Dunne and Boyer generated the most chemistry, charisma, and sensuality in Hollywood in 1939, despite 1939 producing the best couples in Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind, Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon in Wuthering Heights, Leslie Howard and Ingrid Bergman in Intermezzo. So pretty good for them.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about two of those couples later this season, and I guess we can compare their chemistry. I don't know. What did you think of the chemistry here between Boyer and Dunne?
It really worked for me. I think that I understand why you had to break them apart, but I agree that it works way better when they're together.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the movie is so short. I think we should say, that other review mentions this like slow tempo, but it's an 85-minute movie. Like it doesn't really drag, I don't think. And when they're apart, that's what's important, so that they can kind of have their own emotional journeys and be able to come back together at the end. But yeah, it is more fun. Like I enjoyed that early bantery stuff when they're on the ship and they're getting to know each other, and that's when the movie is at its lightest, I think, and that you can tell their chemistry. I personally find Charles Boyer a bit like smarmy, and so I think I've enjoyed him when he's playing a bit more of a cad, and so I wasn't maybe as swept up in the romance. And like we said, he's this playboy, and he kind of uses women for their money, it seems like, in a way, before he meets Irene Dunne. So I was not quite fully on board with his like transformation into being, genuinely in love with her or whatever.
Sounds like you did not go on an emotional journey.
No, not so much. I mean, I did like this, but I feel like it was a bit at a distance for me rather than, sort of the emotional engagement with that romance.
Tell us about an emotional journey you've been on recently, Josh.
Well, this podcast is an emotional journey, really. So, Jason, had you seen this or any version of this before?
No, this is all new to this guy.
Yeah, or any Leo? I guess just that Marx Brothers film in terms of Leo McCarey.
Yeah, like I said, a major figure that I have to admit I'm not familiar with. So the Filmerati could come give me a thrashing now, Josh.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I had not seen this either. I've seen, I think 2 or 3 McCarey films. I've also seen that Marx Brothers film, Duck Soup, although not in quite a while. And as we were talking about it, I think right after you watched it, I was misremembering aspects of it. So it's been a while. But I have seen The Awful Truth, which also features Irene Dunne. and is a fun screwball comedy. And I've seen The Bells of St. Mary's and Make Way for Tomorrow, which is another big, I think, a movie that maybe wasn't as well known in the time that it was released, but has become a really well-regarded film over time and is kind of a tearjerker. So I was, somewhat familiar with his work, but I had not seen this or An Affair to Remember, the slightly more famous version of this. So glad to check it out. Dave, had you had any experience with this film?
Nope, not at all. And I was interested to see how it would be.
Yeah.
I think Dave would like Duck Soup a lot because it is wacky and, a lot of the kind of the comedy that we like where it goes just so far out there. It kind of has that feel to it.
Yeah, Dave, have you seen Marx Brothers films? Are you a fan? It seems like something you would enjoy.
I probably would, and I'm sure I've seen some of them, like, back in high school and even earlier, but I don't remember which one is which. I mean, one of these days, I'm sure I'll dive into some of that stuff.
One of these days, maybe in a future episode of ours, too. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
We'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Love Affair. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this special Valentine's Day episode of our season on the films of 1939. We are talking about the romantic classic Love Affair. And Jason, I said I wasn't quite as swept up in the romance as I sort of hoped or that the movie aims for me to be. How did you feel about it?
I thought it was good until they were pulled apart, and then like kind of the way they kept them apart, which I know it's the 1939, but basically they're going to meet 6 months later at the top of the Empire State Building, and she gets hit by a car, and they think she'll never walk again, and she says, "Well, I can't have him see me like that. Like that wouldn't be fair to him." So she kind of she tries to like put it out of her mind. And of course, when they finally meet up, he doesn't care and he's there for her. So I just, by today's standards, that part just kind of rang a little hollow. But when they're together and they're having fun, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it is good. I agree. Like, even if I wasn't as drawn in, it is good and it's entertaining when they're together. And I definitely agree the way that it treats her disability is certainly not the way we would expect it now. And I mean, even in this context, as you said, when they finally reunite at the end of the film, of course, he's not bothered by the fact that she can't walk. I mean, other than hoping that he can, help her or whatever. But the idea that, I can't possibly let him realize that I've been injured this way or whatever. And not only that, at one point, like she talks to her very understanding ex-fiance who remains her friend and, says that, I couldn't even ask him to help me or let him know about what's going on so that he would offer to help me because that somehow would like make me a burden to him or whatever. And it's definitely, it's not the way that we would portray something like that now. I'm curious how it's portrayed in the 1994 version, which is, I mean, it's 30 years ago, but it's still definitely like very different from how you would do it in 39.
Yeah, and we talked about An Affair to Remember, which to me is so odd. I tried to track it down this week, but I couldn't. But it's so strange to me to think that like what if they they remade the movie and they remade it with the same director and it's 20 years later. It's such a strange thing to me, like to think like, would they like, hey, let's remake, for instance, When Harry Met Sally and get Awesome Movie, your favorite, Rob Reiner to direct it with like a new cast, but it's just a remake,
Right. I mean, I feel like that has happened in the past. I mean, just off the top of my head, like Alfred Hitchcock made The Man Who Knew Too Much twice in, like 20-ish years apart or something like that. But I feel like now that would happen just if it's like a foreign language film. And there's definitely instances where the same filmmaker will remake their own film in English.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But these little points you're talking about where like she's back hanging out with the ex-fiance and I believe he gets to hang out with his fiance too, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, he does. Michelle, he ends up hanging out with her, but it's there's less of that. He kind of runs into her and they go out on the town and then she wants him to kind of stay out and he's like, no, I'm not feeling it. But you get the impression that Terry and her ex-fiance have become like buddies and they're spending time together or whatever, which is nice.
I thought like maybe they were just going back to their old romances.
No, I don't think so. Because I mean, at one point, he sort of the ex-fiance, Terry's ex-fiance, makes some sort of hint about like, hey, but what about me? And she's like, nah. So I think that's the idea that maybe these people are familiar to them or whatever. And again, they're very understanding about having been dumped and are happy to spend time with these people. So I don't think it's ever meant to be that they're going back to their romances. And of course, one thing about this movie is that they had to be very, very careful because of the Hays Code, and a lot of things were changed because adultery, it could be depicted, but it could only be depicted as like wrong and punished. And I believe the whole idea of Terry being hit by the car and paralyzed came from that necessity of having the characters have to be sort of like punished for cheating, and then became an essential element of the story, right? That we always remember, that's included in the remakes.
And that's what I hate. Crap like that with that stupid code, stupid crap, Josh.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I mean, there are instances in movies where having to get around the code does lead to creativity. It leads to clever dialogue to insinuate things that they couldn't actually say. But yeah, overall, the code is detrimental to creativity and to artistic expression. Absolutely.
There's a great line that I think she says in there that I had read was actually a line from an earlier Leo McCarey movie. And I remember, I didn't know that at the time, but I love the line where she says, the things we like best are either illegal, immoral, or fattening.
Yeah, it is a great line. And she says it in the context of that she's quoting her father, who she quotes at one other point saying some sort of aphorism. And I think it was in Wikipedia, it said that like some audiences kind of groaned at that because they remembered as a reference to this presumably much like broader, more comedic Leo McCarey film. But of course, now we watch it, I don't think any of us realized that it was a reference to something else. And so it just sounds like a clever little line in here. But, I could see if that was a famous thing, I don't know. It's like some famous, if some famous comedy director was making a serious movie now and threw in some goofy famous line from one of their other comedies, it might seem awkward.
Well, it's from Six of a Kind, a 1934 movie. And the reason I could see audiences, if they knew, getting upset was because W.C. Fields, who said it in that movie, ad-libbed it. But he gave McCarey the approval to use it in this film.
Right. And I mean, but even, I don't know if it's about that like approval, but more that like, W.C. Fields, obviously not this romantic lead or whatever. So to take something that's kind of sarcastically delivered by this famous comedian and put it in the mouth of the romantic heroine maybe seemed awkward to people.
This was originally set as a 1850s period piece about a French ambassador and the tragic romance that he experiences.
Yeah, a lot of changes, it seems like, again, in part because of the code, that in order to keep the central idea of these people being in other relationships and meeting each other and then, breaking their relationships off, they had to find a way to present it that would be acceptable to the code, and maybe making it a more contemporary story made it easier for them to do that.
And it's interesting because I'll just plug it right now. Our next movie is Rules of the Game, the Renoir movie, and the way that they kind of handle love and adultery and multiple partners is so different than this.
Right. Well, again, the code, which didn't exist in France or in any other country at this time. Certainly in Europe, there was a lot more freedom to make movies with that kind of subject matter versus in Hollywood, unfortunately.
So, Josh, you mentioned your kind of lukewarm reception to Mr. Boyer, but let's talk about Grandma.
You love Grandma, clearly, right? Maria Ouspenskaya, she's lovable.
And she is lovable, and it's a nice sequence, and you could see the warmth between her and Irene Dunne's character, and that's kind of what did it for me, is like you could see like the growing affection that they all have for each other, all three of them, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see that warmth between her and Irene Dunne, and also you see that warmth between her and Charles Boyer, her grandson. And I think that also helps for kind of what I was saying, is that when we meet him, he's known as this playboy. And I mean, he picks her up in this very kind of suave manner. And I mean, is disingenuous in the sense that like he's engaged and it's not like they just accidentally bump into each other and fall in love. Like he's engaged, but he's literally on a boat for 8 days and he's like, oh man, I can't spend 8 days without hooking up with some lady. Let's see who's around. And he goes and picks her up. So we have this impression of him maybe as this kind of player or whatever. And so seeing him interact with the grandmother, I think softens that impression of him a bit for us.
I think so. Like I said, I think the fact that they both kind of the grandma, you see the way they each interact with the grandma and the way that the grandma interacts with each of them. And that could kind of build the love that they have for each other, the Boyer and Dunne characters. But I mean, she, you're putting this on Boyer. She has a fiance. She's on the prowl too.
Well, but she's less, I mean, she does have a fiance, but she's less on the prowl in that she's just kind of standing there minding her own business and he starts talking to her and then says, let's go back to my room or your room or whatever. And so, I mean, he's clearly the initiator of it, but yeah, she could have rebuffed his advances more strongly, I suppose. I'm just saying that not that they're unlikable, and I think their banter is fun during that sequence, but I just think that to sort of make the leap from fun, sexy banter of people who are being kind of naughty and maybe cheating on their fiancés to genuine, heartfelt love, having those interactions with the grandma who's so like wonderful and pure, it helps.
I agree with you, Josh. It goes from this tawdry, real toe up from the flow up into this wonderful, storybook romance.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's not tawdry per se early on. I mean, it can't be really, obviously, with the code, but it does have this more sense of kind of naughtiness and maybe what people expected a bit more from McCarey because he's known for these screwball comedies.
And they reference it. The characters reference it. Oh, everyone's watching us. We shouldn't be eating together or hang out together. And they always end up back together, don't they?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a point where some photographer is going to take a picture of them and Charles Boyer like steals the film and throws it overboard and things like that. They know how it would be seen by people, especially because he is like this famous playboy and is about to get married to this famous heiress and they don't want people knowing. So yeah, they understand that what they're doing is sort of perceived as wrong, but they can't help falling in love.
Someone should put that into a song lyric. You ever know any heiresses?
Maybe. I mean, you and I both, we went to high school with some wealthy people. I don't know if any of them would qualify as heiresses.
Maybe heirs.
Yeah. I don't know. Something like that. But she doesn't really, I feel like, Terry's fiance, who is some sort of businessman, he gets a bit more screen time and they show how supportive he is of her or whatever. But the heiress doesn't get nearly as much of a presence as even when she kind of hooks back up with Michelle.
She has a family fortune to take care of, Josh.
I don't think she's really taking care of it per se.
Well, I'm just assuming these things then. How about that?
Yeah, I guess so.
So we have to talk about my favorite part of the movie. And I thought Dave probably liked it too. When Irene Dunne, when Terry's character gets this gig at the nightclub in Philadelphia and she goes to like a boarding house and the landlady is so funny to me. Yeah. She just comes in and she's like, this immigrant landlady and she's talking. And then she just, no matter what she's saying, she's like, maybe it's better that you don't have a lover because then you'll have kids and your kids will end up ashamed of you. And it always comes back to the kids being ashamed of her. And I was like laughing out loud because it just seemed to come out of nowhere each time. And I was just like, I love this character.
Yeah, she's very entertaining. And she really just shows up in that one scene. And the actress is uncredited. Her name is, I'll probably mispronounce, Farika Boros, who is, she's actually a Hungarian actress. And yeah, I mean, I think they throw in that comedy throughout the film, even as it gets more serious. And, it's another kind of contrast of people's relationships. You have the grandma who obviously had this great long marriage with her late husband, who was a diplomat. And, the heiress who is kind of, presumably, when Michelle breaks it off with them, she's on to the next dude, I would imagine, pretty quickly. She's a, party girl or whatever. So all these people around them showing different examples of kinds of relationships.
It's just strange that no matter what situation this woman got into, it ended with her kids being ashamed of her.
Right. And it's unclear why the kids are ashamed of her exactly.
And she brings it up in like such a jovial manner, like it's probably for the best because your kids will end up ashamed of you.
Right.
Okay, have a nice cup of tea and good night.
I mean, it is right, because when Terry says, "Oh, how are you doing?" or something like that, and she's like, "Oh, well, I don't make any money, and my husband is a bum, and my kids are ashamed of me, but I'm great."
Dave, mark it down. We just got an impression from Josh, and
I loved it.
Great. It made me very happy as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was that a favorite moment for you too, Dave?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I really liked about the movie was all of the mixed tones. You brought it up in some of those reviews earlier. It's not just comedy and drama. It's like different kinds of comedy, from the wacky stuff like that character to, more slick, romantic comedy kind of, material. It's kind of all over the place, and I like that about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of all over the place, but like I said, I feel like it does smoothly. It doesn't feel like it's just like jarringly jumping from one thing to another. You can get those sentimental moments, and they feel earned. I feel like, again, even if I wasn't as swept up in the romance, it wasn't that I didn't buy it. And I think when you get to the point where they're feeling this longing for each other or whatever, when they're apart, or they're tortured over the idea that the other person might not feel the same way that they do or whatever, I think it came across as genuine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Josh, with the different tones, I do agree that everything's earned. I just felt like there were different levels of enjoyment. Like, sometimes that happens with tonal shifts, is like it either works and elevates, or it kind of stops the momentum. And I felt like a few times the momentum stopped here, but overall, the lead performances are so strong, it's tough not to go on the ride with them, or the crossing with them.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that the momentum does slow. And like I was saying before, it's a short movie, so it doesn't take forever. Like the sequence or whatever, the section of the film where they're separated is not that long, but it does feel like, okay, we know they're going to get back together. Let's just kind of like get around to that, or you get impatient maybe with the characters, especially as we were saying earlier, the idea of Terry, like, oh, I can't possibly tell him what's going on with me. Like, no, come on, he loves you. You can tell him. And you maybe get a little impatient with that.
Yeah, the thing is with that aspect of it, it did kind of, diminish the momentum. At the same time, they did a good job during that sequence of like building her character, finding a new career, and seeing how other people, the kids, the orphans, there's always orphans, Josh.
Yeah.
How they relate to her and admire her, so all that stuff, it's overall like it's definitely one to watch. And like, I always talk about the Before series. I love Linkletter. You could see like imprints of that on this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is obviously a hugely influential film for romances going forward for the next several decades. And so did you like The Orphans? What did you think of The Orphans, Jason?
They need a home, Josh.
They do.
They need a home.
Did you like their singing?
If you two don't get married, the orphanage will close. So they were fine. They're very minor in the whole scheme of things. You could toss them aside like their parents did.
Yeah, you could. I feel like I had maybe a little more of The Orphans than I needed. But you're right. It is nice to show her kind of like finding a position, and she finds fulfillment in teaching music to these orphans, and seems happy. And Michel as well, when he becomes, he returns to his passion for painting and he becomes successful there, you get the sense that they did do what they set out to do, which was to find like actual fulfillment from their own independence before they got back together.
Yeah, it all does feel earned. At the same time, like if you get swept up in such a love affair, you would think you'd be like, hey, we're going to stick together and I'm going to get this job and I'm going to support you and you're going to be my teammate and all this. Not like, hey, I'm going to go spend 6 months torturing myself without you just to prove to you that I'm worth your time and effort.
Right. I mean, I feel like it was just as much about proving to themselves that they were worthy of it as it was about proving to the other person.
But I don't see why you have to be apart to prove that to yourself.
I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe, again, it's partly, I think maybe even the code that they had to fully extricate themselves from being engaged before they could really be together so that it would satisfy those requirements. Sense. Yeah.
So. It sounds like a terrible studio note. Should we rate it, Josh?
Yeah,
5 Atlantic crossings?
Sure. That's a long time. You're going to be on that boat a long time with 5 of those.
And if the waters are choppy, you're in trouble. I gave it 3. You should watch the movie. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. I also give it 3 Atlantic crossings. Like I said, it wasn't, I found it pleasant. I didn't necessarily get swept up in it, but it's certainly enjoyable to watch. Dave, how would you rate this?
Sounds like, Josh, you had a like affair.
Very, very much so, yes.
I gave it 3.5, which I guess means that the ship sank.
Oh, yeah, you only got halfway across.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's okay. They were
always turn around
in each other's arms, like Rose and whatever. Jack, is that from Titanic?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Love Affair. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year in this special Valentine's Day episode of our season on the films of 1939. We are talking about Leo McCarey's romantic classic Love Affair. And as we've mentioned multiple times already, McCarey himself remade this film in 1957 under the title An Affair to Remember with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr. And that movie has kind of overshadowed this one in terms of its popularity. It's the one I think more people end up watching and are familiar with. It's had its own big legacy, mainly in like Sleepless in Seattle, where the characters watch it, they specifically reference it, and then that movie ends itself with its own meeting at the top of the Empire State Building, which the characters are engaged in because they've watched An Affair to Remember.
Spoiler alert, the Empire State Building, not in Seattle.
That is true. That's only Tom Hanks's character is in Seattle. That's sort of the whole deal with that movie. It's anyway.
I hear his not doing well with the sleeping.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, Jason has not seen Sleepless in Seattle.
I feel like I've done this pretty well. The 94 movie, I tried to track that down. That's tough to find also. That's with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening, right?
Yeah, they remade it under the original title Love Affair in 94, directed by Glenn Gordon Caron, who's best known as the creator of Moonlighting. So that was not necessarily well regarded, but it does feature, I think, Katharine Hepburn's final performance. So
it does.
That is
right.
That is something.
Did you watch any of the Indian remakes and adaptations?
No, I have not. There are Indian versions of this film from both 1965 and 1999, that one being, I think, a direct remake of the first Indian version. So, it's like I said, it's interesting that the whole like injury and paralysis aspect of this was something that they put in essentially to satisfy the production code, and that became this essential element of the story that carries over into other versions and is largely what people remember about it.
I'd really like to see a Blaffair to Rememblack starring Tracy Jordan.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, from 30 Rock, of course. And that is the remake that Tracy Jordan starred in. Yeah, well, someday, we'll get that.
Hey, Josh, have you ever seen the other movies that Boyer and Dunne starred in? When Tomorrow Comes, I believe you mentioned, and Together Again?
No, I have not. Those are less familiar. And I mentioned, it was a Leo McCarey movie that I mentioned, Make Way for Tomorrow, which is a different movie. But no, I haven't seen those, but I guess they were, because of their pairing here that was so successful and they had that chemistry and also they got along in real life. They made a couple more movies together and those are not nearly as well known, but sure, I'd check them out.
Oh, how benevolent of you.
Thank you. Ugh. Yes, I'll do that for those people. So, we've talked a lot about McCarey's career as well. He was a huge Hollywood figure at this point. This was a later point in his career, but he continued to be big in Hollywood. Going My Way, as we said, was another highly awarded film of his starring Bing Crosby. And I've seen the sequel to that, The Bells of St. Mary's, which is a movie about trying to save an orphanage from being shut down. That's literally actually what it's about. And featuring little kids. And it's a sort of it's a known as a Christmas movie, even though only a very small portion of it takes place at Christmas, but it does feature like a Christmas pageant put on by the orphans that McCarey had the child actors improvise, which is sort of amusingly odd to watch.
It's just hard for me to think of Bing Crosby in Christmas and not think of David Bowie going, "Peace on earth."
Is that a David Bowie impression? Is that what that's meant to be?
Do you know the little drummer
I
boy
know
duet
that. I
they
just
did?
does not really sound like David Bowie there, but
I can't do it. But it's just such a strange duet.
It is.
Look up. If you've ever seen Little Drummer Boy with Bing Crosby and David Bowie, look that up.
Yeah.
Josh, here's a fact that I found to be just bonkers because of, we're talking about how, as we always say, like, hey, they made 100 movies together in 4 years, right?
Right.
This, the filming of this took place in the fall of 1938, and the rough cut was screened in January of 1939.
Yeah, well, they did things more quickly back in the day. And
Efficiency,
I think
buddy.
even so, this one it like went over in terms of its shooting schedule or something. So even that, they still turned it around that quickly. McCarey worked until 1962 was his final film called Satan Never Sleeps. Irene Dunne, she only worked also until 1962, although she lived for many more years after that. She remained a comedy star in the 50s, last made a film in 1952, and then was on TV for a bit. But ultimately, she decided to retire. She was involved in a lot of humanitarian and charity efforts. And for us here in Vegas, I found this fascinating. She and her husband were involved in a lot of real estate investments later in her life, including the Huntridge Theater here in Las Vegas, which they co-owned through the Huntridge Theater Company starting in 1951.
Man, I wish they would buy it back right now.
Yeah, I don't think they're really around to do that. We're getting finally. I feel like this is a tangent, but whoever owns the Huntridge right now, aren't they? They're really actually putting the effort into it to revive it.
I think so. It's Jay Dapper, I think.
Jay Dapper carrying on the legacy of Irene Dunne.
Yeah. Irene Dunne was nominated 5 times for Best Actress, so pretty good. Cimarron, Theodora Goes Wild, The Awful Truth, and like we said, Love Affair, and I Remember.
Yeah, The Awful Truth, and Theodora Goes Wild is also a fun kind of screwball romantic comedy that she's good in.
Charles Boyer had 4 Oscar nods of his own, and other than Gaslight, what do you like him in, Josh?
I really like Clooney Brown, which is Ernst Lubitsch's final film, and is another romance where he is the romantic lead alongside Jennifer Jones, who's really, really good in that film. But I feel like it plays more into, like I said, my impression of him as being somewhat smarmy. And that's part of the charm of that movie, is that he is this sort of snooty intellectual that is amused by her character, who is really, really into plumbing. And that's like not a euphemism. She just loves plumbing. And it's a very weird, like fun comedy about the British kind of class system or whatever. So that's an underrated movie, but Gaslight is great. And that also plays into the idea of him being kind of disingenuous or whatever, where of course he is, gaslighting, as we now say, based on that film, his wife into thinking that she's crazy.
Maybe she was crazy, Josh. Maybe she gaslit herself.
No, I think you should maybe watch that movie.
Hey, Josh. Maurice Moscovitch, who played the art dealer as Maurice Colbert, this is interesting. He was a big star in Yiddish theater. He was in The Great Dictator. And then they cast him in this film called Dance Girl Dance, but he died during prep, and they rewrote the role for Maria Ouspenskaya.
Oh yeah, so she is very distinctive here. She had a fairly short career. I mean, seemed like she started playing these old lady roles later in her life, but she did appear in a bunch more movies until 1949, which is when she died. And I always remember her as the gypsy who curses the Wolfman in the Wolfman, and then later shows up in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So that, which I had watched not that long ago, and I was like, oh yeah, that's where I know her from. She's the gypsy lady from the Wolfman.
Of this film, she said that it was an atmosphere of work that is inspirational. Actors, electricians, and cameramen loved their work and did not want to break away from that atmosphere. So more praise for McCarey. He seems to be a favorite of everyone.
Yeah. He, I mean, I think that's the thing that we were talking about is because at the time, he was just beloved by fellow people in Hollywood. And, after that is over, maybe his legacy hasn't been as strong, but he's obviously made a lot of classic films, including this one.
We're bringing it back. He's the Rob Reiner of the 1930s for us.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get some more of his films when we further explore the 1930s in our next several seasons, as we are obviously planning to do.
Mhm.
So
right.
anything else you want to say about the legacy of this film, Jason?
Josh, I said everything.
Okay, well, I just was checking. I guess that is it. That's Love Affair, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can send us love notes online and on social media.
That's right. Crossover to our social media, which is awesomemovieyear.com, not social media, but that's the website. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Dumpster Fire. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy on all the socials. Of course, go for Jason on Letterboxd.
Some old stuff for me is at joshbellhateseverything.com. You can find me at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on that Dumpster Fire, Twitter, or whatever, as well as at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you are on Letterboxd and you watch one of our films, tag Awesome Movie Year in your review. We'd love to know what you thought of the movies that we watch. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
And Jason, you mentioned it already, but what are we doing in our next episode?
It's a foreign film episode, Josh, but even if it wasn't, we should be covering this movie for some reason, any reason, because it's an all-timer. It's Jean Renoir's The Rules of the Game.
So tune in next time for The Rules of the Game, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Or they're tortured over the idea that the other person might not feel the same way that they do or whatever. I think it came across as genuine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Jason, are you doing something?
I'm listening to you.
Oh, okay. You're
We
looking
lost
off. I
Jason.
thought you were like trying to like type or something or whatever. You're like looking over to the side there. Oh.
No, I mean, I was listening to you, but I'll respond.
No. That's fine. That's fine. I just thought if you had something to take care of, we could pause.
No, Dave, leave this all in.